Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome to the newer video here on the channel. So in today's video, we're going to start a new series here on the channel where I basically break down the best builds for all the weapons in New World for PvP. In the first video, we're going to be talking about the Great Axe, but before we get into that, hey, don't forget to hit the like rating, maybe leave a comment about what the next weapon is. And if you really like the content, maybe consider subscribing and becoming a member. It really helps out a lot. So now that we have the intro out of the way, let's get into the build. And actually a little bit before the build, I kind of want to preface this because I think it's important. This is a new series and I don't know how I'm going to edit it. Basically, I think the best way might be to explain a little bit about the build, talk a little bit about the points, maybe talk about why we don't choose some of the skills in relation to other points and stuff in the tree, and then maybe show some gameplay footage of me in a war using the weapon, because I do run axe hammer and I am trying to max out all the weapons and build perfect builds and stuff like that. And my guild and I are always talking about what we think is the most optimal thing and getting specific perks. And at the end of the day, this is another video what we found is the best. This might be different on other servers. A discussion in the comments is always helpful and always makes us learn about the game better and improve the community and all that sort of stuff. So at the end of the day, this is the best build that we have found. And is this the best build in the game? We believe so, but we are just one guild on one server. There is a humongous community who might have different opinions about this. All right, so with that being said, let's get into the three primary skills that we think you should be picking up, and that is Reap, Charge, and Gravwell. And a lot of people talk about, well, Reap isn't as good as Maelstrom, why not go Maelstrom? And we have been trying Maelstrom variations, right? Because Maelstrom does have an AoE pull and it pulls people closer, and then even if you get to the max tier, it pulls again, doing an extra spin and dealing weapon damage. And it seems to be a little bit more consistent compared to Reap, especially in wars, which still are kind of a little laggy and buggy sometimes and a little weird. And the main reason, or the big difficulty, because we do agree that Maelstrom is very powerful, the hardest thing is getting Bloodlust, because we believe that Bloodlust is probably the most important thing as a Great Axe user. You get to move 30% faster towards enemies and you do 15% more damage, and we think that that's the main focus and the main driver that makes Great Axe so good. And when you go to get Maelstrom, you basically are switching it for Reap, and taking out these 4 points now makes it harder to get the 11 points that you need to get to Bloodlust. And with that, you have to start picking up secondary upgrades to Charge, which would be these 2 charge skills, and you'd have to pick this up, which is okay, but we feel these are actually just 2 wasted points. So what we noticed is if you're going to go a Maelstrom build, you might not use Gravwell and go towards Execute, so you can put basically these points into this section, and then have basically these points swap out here. You go to Maelstrom instead of Gravwell, and then you kind of find a split in between. But we think that Reap allows for an easy transition to Bloodlust, and it's still a very good skill, right? It's still very powerful. It still pulls targets closer and also heals you for 30% of damage done by Reap, which keeps you sustained, right? The thing about the Great Axe is you're not going to be doing the most raw single DPS, right? Because if you're going to do something like that, you'd probably pick up a hatchet, right? But the benefits of the axe is that it has really good AoE damage, right? And then it also has the stickiness. A lot of people say it's the lunge, and you'll notice it if you're doing PvP, that you kind of fly at people almost, right? And the Bloodlust and Charge and stuff like that keep you on people, right? But don't get me wrong, we do still think that Maelstrom is better than Reap, but for the purpose of a Great Axe swing group or a primary axe user, if you're using this as your primary weapon, we think that Reap pushing into Bloodlust in a war and in PvP environments is a better build when you're using Great Axe as a primary weapon. And in these videos, I plan to make the builds if you're going to be using this weapon as your primary weapon, right? If you're using the axe as a secondary option, you have more flexibility, right? If you're using a sword and board as your primary weapon, right, and you're on point constantly as a tank, you might go singular just down the Mauler tree, right, and just put as much as you can into this side of the tree, and even potentially get Mauler's Fury, because you're on point constantly and you don't need to be running people down and chasing them down, right? Because your main goal is to shield up, hold point, and you're a tank. But if you're like a melee DPS and you're trying to be sticky and stay on like healers that might be rolling in light, or mages that might be trying to like ice wall you, and you have to like jump, dodge through the ice wall and push them, you know, Bloodlust is very important. And this Reap keeping them on you, because Reap does have a longer distance of a pull than Maelstrom, right? Take into account that these builds that I'm going to be talking about, and even the gameplay you're going to be seeing, is the Great Axe is the primary weapon. All right, so now that we've covered the 3 main skills, I kind of want to transition and talk about a couple of these side points that I believe are like key and fundamental in making the Great Axe build that we've developed so good. So like I said before, we don't really think that execution or speed is really useful, right? And I noticed a lot of people picking this up because they're like, well, I get 20% haste if I hit 2 or more targets with a single Great Axe Light. It's great, right? Yes and no, right? You're already getting that passive from Bloodlust, right? Even though Bloodlust is a little buggy sometimes, like there's no reason to double up on Bloodlust. Like you have the stickability, if that's even a word, with Bloodlust. You don't need this, right? What we believe you need is like more sustainability, especially in larger groups, which is why we recommend stuff like critical gain, which anytime you hit a crit, you kill yourself for 10%, right? We believe that you should get something like, while holding a Great Axe, gain 10% damage absorption when 3 or more foes are within 4 meters. When you're Great Axing in a group, and especially in a war, you're gonna have 3 or more people on you consistently. So this is constantly gonna be proccing. Same thing goes for center of attention. While holding a Great Axe, 10% more damage when 3 or more foes are around you, right? This 10% more damage is going to proc on this critical damage. Whenever you're dealing a crit, you're going to be dealing 10% more damage on that crit, and it's going to help heal more. You know, obviously crit damage increase, like Keen Edge, these are very simple. And a lot of the other things, like when you're below, or when an opponent is below a certain HP threshold, deal more damage. That'll be able to keep you sustaining, right? Great Axe attacks against foes below 30% health heal you for 10% of the damage done. Feed is really good. Basically what we're looking at is like a lot of sustain tools. Reap, we make sure to go down the full tree to heal yourself for 30% of the damage done, you know, and you do a lot more damage when you hit the Reap, especially if you have the full bin attack at the end. Stuff like that, you know. Bloodlust, you do 15% more damage. That'll proc into these heals and these sustain tools, you know. You already have a lot of the movement speed off just hitting the Bloodlust tip right here, right? And we believe that like upgrading charge, this is actually just, we've tested this in particular because before we were doing this and not had these 2 originals, like these 2 like massive AoE buffs, because we thought fully proccing our charge was good, but we believe that this execute thing is just not worth it at all, and having these buffs down here is actually massive. Because in wars and like stuff like Outpost Rush and open world PvP, like Bloodlust is good enough to either get in, or you have a haste pot in a war to get in, but like we only really use charge as like a disengage tool to get out of like a sticky situation. So to have these things would be a waste, and like this is very important. All right, so now that I've pretty much covered everything I want to talk about, and obviously there was gameplay on the screen, which is what I plan to do in between a lot of these things, I kind of want to cover like what I think is like the proper armor that you should be using with a class like this, and what the goal of this build is. Obviously this is for heavy sustain. You know, you should be able to walk into a group of 2 or 3 and like really hold your own, and potentially even kill 1 to 2 of them and even leave, right? So obviously you're going to want to be using, let me hit the tab button, full void bent armor like this. Look at what these onyxes, yeah, even though these are like supposedly they're bugged or whatever, onyxes are super good, right? Physical damage absorption, especially if you're using void bent, which has like more elemental absorption, right? As you can tell, like it has way more elemental absorption down here, so you like want to get the physical gems. So we believe that pretty much anyone who uses an axe, you're gonna want to be like a sustained type of DPS, who like almost kind of like a bruiser if you've played like League of Legends or something like that. You want to be using like your high health pool, a lot of armor, and like taking these long trades where like at the end of it you're going to be winning because you're going to be healing more than they are. You're going to be stopping their heals by like reaping and like just really being disruptive, tanky, and actually being able to drop a lot of damage. So now that I've shown you the armor, let's talk a little bit about the attributes. And obviously you'd want this to be 300, and of course you can eat food, but preferably I would like you to sit at 300 and 150. It is possible. I'll even go back to my items. If I had like one more strength here, one more strength here, or potentially like two more, like three more strength here, because like the weapons can max at 30 and these can each be at 25, as well as the armor. You know, if I had the most optimal build, you would easily be at 300 and 150, and you could sit at this throughout your entire day. And then you would, like, prior to a war, you would eat some con food and probably be at like 300, 190 con. And like you'd pretty much be like a really beefy DPS, like bruiser, which is the build we believe great axes should be. All right, so let's switch back over to the full cam to put a little bow on this video. All right, guys, so that's the end of the video. And please, in the comments down below, this is a new series, and I don't know if this is the best way to present this type of information. So any sort of feedback in the comments about like what I should do in future videos or these like PvP guides is super helpful and it'll help me out a lot. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And don't forget to come slide by the stream. I stream pretty much every single day. And also, sorry if this was a long video. I've been trying to make them shorter, but there's a lot of information I want to include and stuff like that. All right, before it gets too long, peace out.
Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky, come get high with me, that's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me.